Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Exodus chapter 28 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're looking at what you could call the ultimate architect's blueprint for the priesthood. We are going to explore the incredibly intricate, beautiful, and highly functional designs of the sacred garments that God commanded Moses to have made for his brother Aaron. And I want to be clear right off the bat, this isn't just some ancient fashion guide. It's an absolute masterclass in design, purpose, and spiritual responsibility. So we're going to step back in time together and discover exactly what it meant to literally wear the weight of a nation. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today, so you know exactly where we're headed. First, introduction and context. Second, the ephod and breastpiece. Third, the robe and turban. Fourth, tunics and undergarments. Fifth, key ideas and lessons. And finally, number 6, a chapter recap. Let's get right into it. To really understand where we are in the text right now, we have to remember the context. Moses is up on Mount Sinai and he's receiving direct instructions from God. Up until this exact point, those instructions have been entirely about building the physical tabernacle itself, the tent of meeting. But right here, in the very first 4 verses of chapter 28, the focus completely shifts from the building to the people who will actually serve inside it. God commands Moses to bring his brother Aaron forward, along with Aaron's sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. They are the ones chosen to serve as priests. And right away, God orders the creation of these sacred garments for Aaron. Now, the text specifically tells us the why behind these clothes. In Hebrew, they are to be made for kavod and tiferet. Kavod literally translates to glory or weight, like a deep sense of gravity and significance. And tiferet translates to beauty or splendor. So these garments are fundamentally designed to visually communicate the heavy responsibility and the divine order of the tabernacle. It's about sanctifying Aaron and setting him entirely apart for this holy, holy service. Now, if we look at verse 5, we are given an exact list of the materials that need to be used. And let me tell you, these are absolutely not your everyday fabrics. The text specifies gold, blue yarn, purple yarn, scarlet yarn, and fine twined linen. What's so profound about this specific detail is that these are the exact same luxurious, highly valuable materials used to create the curtains and the veil of the tabernacle itself. Think about that for a second. The high priest is literally going to be wearing the walls of the sanctuary. He essentially becomes a living, breathing, moving extension of the holy tent. And to make these, Moses is instructed to go speak to all the wise-hearted artisans. These are the skilled men and women whom God has specifically filled with a spirit of wisdom. Because crafting these garments, it isn't just about technical sewing skills. It requires actual divine inspiration. Section 1, the ephod and breastpiece. This covers the outermost layers. So, in verses 6 through 8, the text describes the very first piece, the ephod. Now, ephod is a very specific Hebrew term that doesn't really have a perfect direct English translation, which is why we usually just kind of refer to it as an apron-like garment. It's made by a highly skilled craftsman using all those rich sanctuary materials we just talked about, the gold, the blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and the finely twisted linen. The text gives us the literal construction details here. It has 2 shoulder pieces that are joined at the end so it can be securely fastened together over the priest's body. It also features a skillfully woven waistband. But this waistband isn't separate. It's actually woven to be of one piece with the ephod itself, made of those exact same exquisite materials, and it's used to tie the whole garment securely around Aaron's waist. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what sits directly on top of those shoulder pieces. In verses 9 through 14, God instructs Moses to take exactly 2 onyx stones. In Hebrew, these are called shoham stones. But listen, these aren't just there to look pretty. A master gem cutter is instructed to engrave the names of the 12 sons of Israel right onto these stones. You've got 6 names on one stone and the remaining 6 names on the other, all meticulously ordered by their birth. These engraved stones are then permanently mounted in beautiful gold filigree settings and fastened tightly onto the 2 shoulder pieces of the ephod. And the text gives us the clear, literal function for this. They are stones of memorial. Aaron is commanded to literally bear the names of the children of Israel on his shoulders as a memorial before the Lord. Whenever he goes to work in the sanctuary, he is carrying the sheer physical weight of the people right on his shoulders. Moving right along to verses 15 and 16, we meet the next major garment, and it connects directly to the ephod. In Hebrew, this is called the Hoshen Mishpat, which translates to the breastpiece of judgment. Like the ephod, it's the work of a master craftsman, made of the exact same gold, blue, purple, scarlet yarn, and fine linen. The text gives us its precise dimensions, too. It is to be a perfect square, a span long and a span wide. Now, a span is roughly the distance from the tip of your thumb to the tip of your pinky finger when your hand is stretched all the way out, so about 9 inches. But crucially, the text says it absolutely must be folded double. So it is essentially a woven, square, double-layered pouch, and it is worn directly over the high priest's heart. On the front of this folded pouch, verses 17 through 21 tell us there is this absolutely stunning display of precious stones. Exactly 12 stones, arranged carefully in 4 rows of 3. The text lists them out meticulously to paint a really vibrant picture for us. A turquoise, a sapphire, and an emerald in the first row. A jacinth, an agate, and an amethyst in the second, followed by a beryl, a lapis lazuli, and a jasper, and so on. And every single one is masterfully mounted in a gold setting. But again, this is not just about looking wealthy or impressive. Just like the shoulder stones, every single one of these 12 stones is engraved like a seal with the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So think about the contrast here. While the whole nation is carried in 2 collective groups on the shoulders, here on the breastpiece, each individual tribe gets its own unique precious stone, right there on the front. So, the crucial point is, how does this heavy jewel-encrusted square actually stay on? Well, verses 22 through 29 give us the exact engineering steps. First, they make braided chains out of pure gold, almost like a heavy metallic rope. Then, they fastened gold rings to the top corners of the breastpiece. They attached those thick gold chains from the breastpiece rings directly up to the gold settings on the ephod's shoulder pieces. But of course, that just secures the top, right? To keep the bottom from flapping all over the place as the priest works and moves, they put rings on the bottom corners of the breastpiece and matching rings on the ephod near the waistband. Finally, they tied those bottom rings together tightly with a blue cord. The text explicitly states the functional, practical reason for this careful engineering, so that the breastpiece will not swing out from the ephod. This ensures that Aaron always, continuously bears the names of the sons of Israel securely over his heart when he enters the holy place. Now, remember how we said it was a folded pouch? What actually goes inside that double-layered square? Verse 30 tells us to put the Urim and the Thummim inside the breastpiece. Now, these are Hebrew words that literally translate to lights and perfections. Keeping strictly to the literal text here, the simple Peshat, we are told that these are physical objects placed right inside the Hoshen Mishpat, so that they rest directly over Aaron's heart when he enters the presence of the Lord. The text explains their clear, undeniable function. They are the means of making decisions for the Israelites. By carrying these lights and perfections, Aaron physically bears the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before the Lord continually. Section 2. The robe and the turban. Now we are moving to the layer worn underneath the ephod. In verses 31 through 34, we are introduced to the robe of the ephod. The Hebrew word for this specific robe is the meal. Now, unlike that multicolored ephod we just talked about, this robe is woven entirely of solid blue cloth. It has an opening right in the center for the head, but to make sure it doesn't fray or rip during the priest's heavy physical work, because he is doing actual labor in the tabernacle, it has a specially woven binding around the neck hole. It's described almost like the collar of a coat of mail. It is incredibly durable. But the most striking sensory detail is down at the bottom. All around the hem of the skirt, they are commanded to make pomegranates out of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. And space between every single yarn pomegranate is a functioning bell made of pure gold. It's a continuous alternating pattern. Bell, pomegranate, all the way around the hem. So why bells? Well, verse 35 gives us a very serious, very literal, and intensely practical function for this design. The text says Aaron absolutely must wear this robe when he ministers. The sound of the gold bells will be heard when he enters the holy place before the Lord, and when he comes out. The reason? The text says so that he will not die. Approaching the raw, pure holiness of God in the tabernacle is a matter of profound, terrifying gravity. In the ancient world, stepping into the divine presence unprepared was a literal physical danger. The bells serve as a necessary acoustic signal. They are an auditory warning of the high priest's approach into that uniquely holy space. Now, moving all the way up to the head, verses 36 through 38 describe a plate of pure gold. The Hebrew word used here is tzitz, which literally means a blossom or a shining thing. It's essentially like a diadem or a crown. An engraver is instructed to write on it, just like the permanent engraving on a seal, the words, "Holy to the Lord." This heavy, shining gold plate is tied to the front of a finely woven linen turban using a blue cord. But again, the text doesn't just describe it, it gives us the deep functional purpose for this item. It rests continually on Aaron's forehead so that he can bear the guilt involved in the sacred gifts that the Israelites consecrate. By wearing this bold declaration of absolute holiness right on his mind, right on his forehead, he ensures that the people's offerings are acceptable before the Lord, even if there happened to be some unintended minor flaw in how they were presented. Section 3. The tunics and undergarments. These are the foundational base layers for the priests. In verses 39 through 41, the instructions shift just a bit to those base layers and to the assistants. First, we're told the foundational, bottom layer for Aaron himself is a woven tunic of fine checkered linen, known in Hebrew as a catonet, along with his fine linen turban and a beautifully embroidered sash. Then, the text addresses Aaron's sons. Now, they do not wear the ephod, they don't wear the breastpiece, and they don't wear that blue mile with the bells. Their uniform is much simpler: woven tunics, sashes, and headbands. But the text purposefully repeats that crucial phrase from the very beginning of the chapter. These two are made for kavot and tiferet, for dignity and honor. Moses is specifically commanded to put these clothes on Aaron and his sons, and then to anoint them, ordain them, and consecrate them so they may officially and legally serve in the priest office. Finally, we reach the concluding verses of the chapter, verses 42 and 43. Here, Moses is told to make linen undergarments for the priests as a covering for their bodies. The text specifies they must reach from the waist down to the thigh. And this brilliantly illustrates a core, undeniable difference in the worship of the Israelites. Remember, so many of the pagan rituals of the ancient Near East involved nakedness, lewdness, or a total loss of bodily boundary. God makes it an absolute, non-negotiable rule that Aaron and his sons must wear these undergarments to maintain strict modesty whenever they enter the tent of meeting or approach the altar. Once again, there is a severe, life-or-death warning attached here. If they fail to maintain this basic human dignity and modesty, they will incur guilt and die. The chapter closes by forcefully declaring this a lasting, permanent ordinance for Aaron and his descendants. Section 4. Key Ideas and Lessons. Let's look at the overarching meaning of all these garments. If we take a step back and correlate these specific garments to their explicitly stated purposes in the text, a massive, undeniable theme emerges. The high priest is physically carrying the burden and the very identity of the people. Just look at the text we've covered today. He has the ephod stones bearing the 12 tribes on his shoulders, the physical place of human strength and heavy labor. He has the breastpiece bearing the names of the 12 tribes right over his heart, the center of deep emotion and complex decision-making. And he has that shining gold plate on his forehead, the place of thought and pure intention, bearing the guilt of the sacred gifts. He absolutely does not go before God as an isolated, detached individual. No, he goes in entirely wrapped up in the representation of the people he serves. Reading this text also completely forces us to see the striking contrast between ordinary, everyday clothing and these sacred garments. I mean, ordinary clothes are for pure utility, right? They protect us from the cold, the wind, or the burning sun. But these sacred garments are highly specific, deeply functional tools meant strictly for ministering in the holy place. They are absolutely not just fashioned to look pretty or rich. They are designed by direct divine instruction to instill profound dignity, to physically invoke memory before God, and, quite literally, to ensure the spiritual and physical safety of the priest as he navigates that dangerous, razor-thin boundary between what is holy and what is mundane. So what is the practical life lesson here for us, viewing this ancient text today? Even if we aren't high priests walking into an ancient tabernacle, this chapter teaches us fundamentally about the true nature of service and leadership. Serving a higher purpose requires intense, focused preparation and an unwavering attention to detail. It requires maintaining dignity and honor in exactly how we present ourselves to the world. If you are leading others in your life right now, in any capacity, are you carrying their needs on your shoulders through your hard work? Are you keeping them securely fastened over your heart in your love and your care? Because what this text shows us is that you simply cannot lead distantly. You must actively bear the weight of those you serve. Section 5. Chapter Recap. Let's look at the complete uniform altogether. Let's move to and see how this builds by mentally dressing the high priest from the inside out, so we can see how this whole blueprint comes together. First, you have the foundational linen undergarments for strict, non-negotiable modesty. Second, the fine linen woven tunic, the katanet, which is tied securely with the embroidered sash. Third, over that tunic goes the solid blue robe, the menil, ringing loudly with pure gold bells and decorated with bright yarn pomegranates all around the hem. Fourth, on top of that blue robe goes the colorful, expertly woven apron, the ephod, tied tightly at the waist, bearing the 2 engraved onyx stones right there on the shoulders. Fifth, permanently tied to the ephod is the double-layered breastpiece of judgment, flashing with 12 precious stones representing the tithes, securely holding the Urim and Thummim inside its pouch. And finally, sixth, the fine linen turban is placed on his head, featuring that shining, pure gold plate, the zitz, reading clearly, "Holy to the Lord." The detailed blueprint of Exodus 28 shows us, without a doubt, that approaching the divine is not some casual, flippant endeavor. It requires supreme dignity, incredible precision, and a deep awareness that true service means careful preparation, literally carrying others on our shoulders and over our hearts. So the question we are left with is simply this. In our modern world, what garments of dignity and responsibility are we consciously choosing to put on every single day? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.